Hey,
What's up? What's up?
All right, guys, we're about right at the top of the hour. I appreciate y'all for sticking with us. I know we had some calendar things with Eventbrite saying it was an hour earlier, but we're here at the right time. I'm joined by the one and only Jay Kinder. Jay, so where are you joining us from? I always like I know where you are, but I like hearing it over and over.
I am in Puerto Rico, here at the Casita, where we live now. So moved to Puerto Rico a year and a half ago, living a pretty good life here. Love it. Nice weather every day.
Yes, sir. And it was funny about 3 years, or it was about 4 years ago now, right? So for me, Jay's had a huge impact on my life. What he's going to be sharing with you guys today, it's an exact system. What I love about this system is I know Jay doesn't like talking about his losses, but we're talking about how you won 535 listings in a year. How many losses did it take?
More than that. More than I care to really elaborate on. But just like anything, it's failures that lead to victories. You have to be really just like morbidly curious about why you lose in order to go back and iterate on your process in order to consistently win. And so it was a lifetime of listing appointments and many losses that I hated, and commission, people offering to do it for less, and all these different things that we run into, and that kind of this evolved over time to really create a system that is difficult to go in and lose with if you follow the process. So hope to add a ton of value and give some perspective for there's gonna be a lot of nuggets. I do believe there'll be pages of notes that'll be able to be taken down from this for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know for a fact that, about 4 years ago when we decided to start our business after listening to a guy like Jay, literally not a guy like Jay, listen to Jay. And I came back to the room. I was starting to pick it apart and say like, well, if I did Jay's system, but this way we could do it better. My brother's like, hold up. Jay just told us how he made $1 million plus utilizing this system. What in the hell makes you think you're going to know better than this? Like, well, that's a dang good point. So we just started following it to a T. Right? Started following it to a T. And that's what's been able to work with us at a very high level. And I'll tell you what, guys, just follow this listing presentation to a T, and we're going to be able to get you guys to that next level. So Jay, how to win every listing? Where are you going to start us off at?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's a process. And so, I'll explain as we go through this, the things that I did wrong, the things that I learned along the way. And I think a lot of this will resonate. But as you get into competing, I think a lot of times when you go on a listing appointment, if it's a referral and they already know, like, and trust you, you feel very confident that you're going to win the listing. But at a certain point, you go up against, competition. And in my marketplace, unfortunately, I was number 2 in the world for Coldwell Banker, never number 1. And also, even in my own marketplace where I was selling 500 plus homes a year, I was number 2. There was a Remax team that was selling 750 homes a year when I was selling 500 a year. And so I literally competed against them every day. I would go on 4, some days 3, some days 4, some days even 5 listing appointments. And generally speaking, I was competing against them, and it felt like half of them. It maybe wasn't that many, but it felt like I was always competing against them. And the thing was that they could say they sell more homes than me. They could say they sell more homes in that neighborhood than me. They could say anything that I thought I could say to win that listing. They could say that they were better. And I hated losing. And I'll never forget, this kind of started with, they had hired a guy that was a sales manager. His name's Kevin Munchell. He worked for a Chevrolet dealership, and they hired him to be a listing agent for him. And he called me one afternoon. I had a 6 o'clock listing appointment. It was in a neighborhood called Sungate. And he called me and he was laughing because I know the guy, and he's a pretty good dude or whatever. But he calls me and he said, "Hey man, I just want to let you know I took that listing on Sungate this morning, so you can free up your 6 o'clock." And I'll never forget how that made me feel. I was pissed, right? Like, I had set the appointment. I was ready to go and deliver a presentation, and he had come in somehow and got the listing before I could get there. And at that point I knew I had to change something. So I called this is something that we do. We call it an autopsy. Like, if you lose a listing or you don't get it for some reason, you call and just ask us, "Hey, listen, what could I have done differently? Happy to see, you chose my competitor, bite my tongue. What could I have done differently, or what made you decide to do business with them over us?" And they would sometimes, hem haw around about it. And sometimes they would give me some really good feedback. Right. And it was that allowed me to learn what my competition was saying, what they were using, what they were doing, that allowed me to iterate on this process to get it to a place where I could compete against them. So I charge 7%. I mean, anybody can charge whatever they want to charge. We're not trying to dictate that, but I was expensive, and I wanted to be more expensive than my competition, but I didn't know that they would come in and offer to do it at 4%. and they would try to get the listing signed before I could come out there. And so they knew they were competing against me because I would always try to come in last. They would literally drop it to 4%. And what they would say is, well, I'll drop it to 4% if we sell it ourselves. But the listing agents, Pam, Barry, and Kevin, didn't work buyers. So they would never have sold it themselves, but it was a good way for them to get them to move to action and list the house without even getting to hear anything I had to say. And so that was like one of the very first things that really frustrated me, was like, not even getting a chance to get face to face. And so we kind of created this process and iterated over time to really beat anybody. And more importantly, I think the goal here, and really the context of what I'm sharing, there's going to be some good nuggets, I think, along the way. But it's really about like best serving your client. Like, how do you best serve them? And unfortunately, when a seller listens to another agent that tells them a ridiculous price, I think most people on here probably had this happen before. That's not realistic, and they're basically choosing that agent based on hope that what they're telling them is true, but they really didn't have a good reason to choose them over you in the first place. How do you keep those things from happening? How do you not have a seller that chooses somebody else because they like them better? I had two in 1 week. I had two people say, you know what, we just felt more comfortable with Barry. It was Barry Zersky, and then it was some agent I'd never even heard of. And so all of those led to, okay, what am I doing wrong? And so as we go through this process, there's really principles that apply to all the reasons why I was losing. And so we'll cover each of those. The first step in this process is the pre-appointment. Prior to the appointment, what are you doing prior to the appointment? And some of these things are going to seem obvious, but the question is, it's not, knowledge isn't power. It's it's the curse of knowledge. What am I know these things, but am I doing these things? Right. And so you may hear some things that you hear that are familiar, but are you living and doing these things? And for me at the time, I wasn't. And the first thing in the process, step of the process to understand is we're not trying to go on an appointment to convince them to list their home with us. And that's how I used to do it for the longest time. I would go there, I would give them price, and I would try to convince them why they should hire me. And we really want to shift this whole positioning around understanding what their goals are, and you're there to prescribe them a solution to whatever the goal is they're trying to accomplish. And so it starts with gathering information. And on the pre-appointment, before the appointment, we're going to go through a seller counseling interview, and we're going to ask several questions that are really important to how we move through this process when we're face to face. And so it can be you that does the seller counseling interview. I always sucked at it. I would always skip things and not ask questions I should ask, and go out and you end up on an appointment where the decision maker maybe isn't there and things like that. But there's these questions you want to ask, and ultimately you just want them to tell you about the home, and they'll tell you a lot of things that you need to know. And you want to know things like, what are the things that they love about the home? And I'll explain why this is important and how we're going to use this information later to build rapport and establish a connection and become their best friend. So I mentioned, the losing 2 listing appointments because I got basically out-friended. They felt more comfortable with the other agent. It was because I didn't take the time to connect and become their best friend. And I didn't take the time to do that with both parties in many situations. And I would lose the listing. I'm like, dang, there's certain things, like if you skip a step and you learn a lesson, you go back and you're like, okay, I'm never doing that again. I'm going to always make sure I establish a connection and build rapport. And so part of the information gathering process is to know what they enjoyed about the home, why they bought it in the first place. And so a lot of the questions that you're asking to gather information is to leverage that in a way in the conversation to build rapport later. And it's really interesting. When you do this seller counseling interview, even if you do it, especially if you have someone else do it, eventually what I learned was that I wasn't as good as following my own process. And so hiring someone to do that, to go through this initial process, it's like calling a doctor. If you call a doctor's office, the best dentist, every dentist I've ever gone to, the dentist doesn't answer the phone. He doesn't schedule his own appointments. They don't ask all the questions. They don't follow up with you and make sure you're going to show up. And so there's value in being positioned as an expert. There's value actually in being less accessible and being positioned as harder to get to. And so rather than, you doing this, could be a spouse, could be an assistant, could be whoever, but when they ask these questions, they don't necessarily make the connection that you're going to have all this information when you get there. So it allows you to use this information to easily establish rapport and build connection when you do get to the property. So you're asking certain specific questions. And there's one question it's critically important on the seller counseling interview in this pre-appointment phase. And that is, what do you think the house will sell for? And if you've ever asked this question, it's almost 100% that they will say, well, Jay, we were kind of hoping that you would tell us that when you come out, right? And so, I'll explain why this is important. It'll all make sense in a little bit, but this is critical information. You need to know what they're thinking in their mind so that you don't mess this up at a later point in the presentation when you're face to face. And so this is an easy reframe to get this information. They'll tell you, well, we're kind of hoping you would say like, and it's just a simple reframe. You say, well, if you had to guess, what would you say? Right. So you're just asking the same question. And if you pay attention to tonality and of my voice and things, it's non-threatening, but I can do it 2 or 3 times. So role play with me, Nick, a little bit. Say, Nick,
Yeah.
what do you guys have an idea what you think the house might sell for?
Yeah, probably sell for about 500,000.
500,000. Well, don't give me the number. Just say, give me the objection. Like, be hard on me.
Well, Jay, I was hoping that you would come out here and tell me that. Isn't that your job?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. But I mean, if you had to guess, what would you guess the house might sell for today based on what you've seen?
Well, I mean, isn't it like that? That was the whole reason I had you coming out today.
Absolutely. But if you had to just pick a number, what would you say?
I mean, that's I don't know. What would you pick, Jay?
Right. So you see, like, it's not threatening, right? It doesn't come across as like, dude, you're asking the same question 3 times in a row, which is what I'm doing, but I'm just reframing it and trying to get an idea of what they think the house is worth. Now, this number, whatever it is, it could be ridiculously far off the mark. So don't judge them based on the number they give you. But if they give you a number, they're kind of hoping for, and this is going to be more important in the coming next 2 years of your real estate career than it has the last 2 years. So a lot of this is going to be extremely valuable as we go into shifting markets and things start to change. Because the real important thing we have to do is have to get people to believe us based on the advice that we're giving them. They have to trust us. And unfortunately, and it's just the nature of the business. There's more real estate agents out there that'll just tell people what they want to hear, not what they want to hear. Tell them what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. And so you don't want to be in that position where somebody else wins the listing because they said they would do it for less, or they would do it for the price that they want. They hope that's the case. And one of the main premises of this whole process is we're not going to give them price until they accept that we have the best system to sell their home for the most amount of money. Like, once they say yes to that, then we're going to discuss price and how we position the home in the marketplace. But as we go through the seller counseling interview and we ask some of these questions, we want to know what they think the house is worth. That's one of the most critical ones that you want to ask. And the last thing we used to do is, because I would go out on these appointments and get a phone call from someone like Kevin, who said they listed it right out from under my nose before I got there, is and here's the reason why you want to go last. So there's a lot of debate about this, but you want to go last. You want to go last because they're never going to list their house with you on the spot if somebody else is coming after you. And the odds that you're going to come back is pretty rare. If you leave that house and somebody's coming after that and they do half as good a job as you, they might still walk away with the listing. So you always want to set yourself up to be the last one that's coming in. And ironically, sellers seem to like this process. Like, it's a game. They seem to like to help you go last. If you tell them that you want to go last, it doesn't seem to be an issue. They kind of are play along with that pretty easily. And so those guys come last. If you show up on a listing and you're not last, you want to immediately 2-step that. You want to follow the rest of the process I'm going to tell you, but don't go into pricing, because you're going to go back and say, listen, based on everything, there's no way I could, told you the house, what the house is worth today. I'm going to go back, do my research. And then you set up your next appointment for after the last person so that you're coming in last. And so that's a real important step. People that want to meet with 2 or 3 real estate agents are a little bit crazy anyways, right? But if they're going to be meeting with multiple real estate agents, you just want to be the last one, because you'd have to really be bad in order for them to go back and say, I want to go meet with this one again after you follow this process. So those are some of the things. At the end of this seller counseling interview, one of the questions that we asked is, because we knew what sellers were saying, we say, listen, a lot of agents will tell you anything that they can, especially if they know that we're going to be coming out and meeting with you. They'll even lower their commission. They'll do anything just so that you don't hear what it is what we have to share with you guys. So promise me this. Promise me that you won't sign anything until Jay comes out tomorrow at 6. And so this little moral obligation that you're asking for, when somebody makes a promise subconsciously, they don't want to break that promise. And a couple little nuggets in there is they'll use sleazy sales tactics and closing techniques to try to get you to sign the listing right away. If anyone's coming out on their first appointment and trying to get you to sign the listing, just know that they're trying to close you, they're trying to sell you, and they're just trying to keep us from coming in the door and hearing what we have to say. So promise me this. Promise me you won't do anything until you hear what we have to say when we get there. So and what happens is when and this is good training. I mean, Kevin was really well trained. to get that listing, he was closing hard, and he would get people to, move off of that. And then he'd be like, I'll call him and tell him, you don't even have to call him. I'll call him and tell him, which is what he did. And so it worked really well. But now when he goes into this process where he would start to try to close them, hard sell them, which nobody wants to be sold. Nobody ever, anytime you're in a selling environment, there's resistance. And so now I've planted these seeds of sleazy sales tactics, close you, sign paperwork, all of these things that are going around subliminally in their mind. And they're like, it turns them off. And so they also made a promise that they wouldn't sign anything. So it's like, you're really, really almost impossible for somebody to get somebody to sign that paperwork before you get out there. And so that gives you a chance, at least a shot, right? Like, give me a shot. That's all I ask for is don't listen with somebody else before I get there. So that's one of the last questions in the seller counselor interview that I think is really important. Other than that, you're just gathering the information about the property. Let them talk. They're going to tell you more things about the property. It's going to help you to do the best job possible. Now, second thing. So I am of the, I'll tell a quick story. How much time do we have here today, Nick?
Man, you got another 45 minutes for us.
All right.
We have a little time for questions, but yeah, man, you want to tell a story?
Yeah.
Let's hear the story. I always like a Jay Kinder story.
It's one of my favorite mentors is Dan Kennedy, and he's really expensive. And he has multiple books. I've got 10 of his books just sitting here on the shelf. All of his stuff is amazing. But one of the things you learn about Dan Kennedy is very intentional about what you learn about him. In every first chapter of a book, you learn a few things about Dan Kennedy. He hates technology. He's a grumpy old man. He makes people millions of dollars, and he probably wouldn't take you as a client. But if he did, he would probably fire you eventually because he really doesn't like people. And so he's got this persona that he's not on social media. He's hard to find. He's very expensive, and he makes people a shit ton of money, right? And so that's a pretty good persona. He's got a character, right. And in every book that he's written, he wants, that persona is being laid out. This is a guy that makes people a lot of money, hard to get to, very expensive if you're ever going to hire him. And so, and so he does a really good job of positioning, and that works to his favor because what he charges to do a half day with him, I was even in a mastermind. I think we were paying 25 or 30,000 a year for, and to get him to do a half day with us, which was a strategy we were trying to meet with him on about franchising and really, the NAEA stuff that we do, and really all this training I'm sharing today. And we wanted to meet with him because we felt like he was a really valuable mentor that could help us in the direction we're going. And, first of all, he's not on social media. He doesn't have email. He doesn't even have a cell phone, allegedly. And so there's no way to get a hold of this guy. And so we end up at an event, we chase him down in the hallway. He gives us an assistant's email, and we email her, and she sends us over a bill for $38,000 to be paid half up front before we even get on a call with Dan. So we had a call with Dan to even try to feel out this process, but we know Dan is a grumpy old man, probably ain't going to take us as a client. If he does, he's probably going to fire us anyways. And we'd be lucky for him to take our $18,000 and subsequent $18,000. Right. And so, he has a quote that says, let this sink in. Amateurs get paid after the work is completed. Professionals get paid before the work begins. Like, ouch. Right. In real estate, we don't get paid before the work begins. Dan wasn't even going to get on a call with us. And even us knowing what he was teaching us, the marketing principles, the position, all the things that he was doing to us, we still had this fear that maybe Dan wasn't going to take our $36,000, that maybe he wasn't going to take us on as a client. And so it was just an example of positioning. Right. And so we're good. Yeah, we're good. Yeah. So imagine if you could show up on a listing appointment pre-sold in such a way that people hope that you would take them on as a client, right? Like, how powerful would it be if they knew all the things they needed to know about you and how great you were without you having to say how great you are on the appointment? If this is making sense, shake your heads, right? Like, this is a huge distinction, okay, in the process of what I believe most of you are doing on a listing appointment versus what I'm suggesting. And there's tons of things I can share with you on what you need to send out ahead of time. And this is what Dan Kennedy was good at. Dan Kennedy he was going to speak to one of our events that we were doing. There's 1,000 agents that were going to be there. First of all, you had to fly in private from Cleveland to your event. It was going to cost like $75,000 just to get him there. Plus, you had to buy one of his books for all of your attendees, and had to be sent out so many months in advance. You had to do a webinar to indoctrinate them to who Dan Kennedy was. all these things all these things are built into his agreement just to come speak. Why? Because Dan Kennedy doesn't want to get in front of the room and try to explain who the hell Dan Kennedy is. Does that make sense? If Dan Kennedy sits in front of all these people and nobody knows who the hell Dan Kennedy is, he's not going to sell very much at the back of the room. But if he is pre-sold and there's content that's specifically designed to position him the way he wants to be positioned, he's more than happy to get in front of a group of people that have been properly exposed to who he is as an expert, right? And so this is a huge distinction, right? Like, this is not how we think in real estate. But imagine if you sent things out ahead of time that positioned you as such an expert that they would be lucky to be able to have you choose to take their listing, right?
Well, Jay, I think that's also coming down to like what you're positioning yourself on video. Like we're talking about with video nowadays too, is like, how are you being positioned as a real estate agent before you even walk in the door? And one of the big things we talk about is just something as simple as a video text message before you even walk in the door. Just different ways to put you ahead of everybody else, instead of them peeking out the door and saying, hey, is that Jay Kinder coming up? They're peeking out the door and saying, oh, that's Jay. They're swinging the door open and saying, hey, come on in.
100%. And when you make that shift in your business to being a celebrity, at least in the mind of the person that you're going to meet, whether they've known you for a long period of time or a short period of time, but they've been properly indoctrinated and they know your value proposition and your track record of success and all of these things. It changes the game. You're in a position of strength, not a position of weakness, and you're not in a position to try to sell or convince or persuade. You're in a situation where you're there to prescribe to them a solution to whatever their goal is, which is get my home sold by X days so I can move to Houston to see my grandkids, whatever that is. And so fundamentally, as we kind of move through this process, there's a different approach. My goal is to never have to go on an appointment and have to sell why they should do business with you. And so we're going to send them certain things up front and make sure that they're consumed prior to your arrival, so that that's never part of the equation. You've already been pre-sold, and you're going to use client testimonials. You're going to use all kinds of different positioning pieces, magazine tear sheet. I'm going to grab something, Nick, because I have a couple of things here, but keep the conversation rolling. I'll grab a couple of examples just so I can show people.
Absolutely. So guys, as Jay's grabbing those examples, what I want you guys to do is drop your questions below. It's going to be a first come, first serve type of environment. There will not be a recording provided to you guys for today. Just so you know, I see some questions on that. This will not be a recording. So if you guys have questions for Jay, you literally cannot pay for Jay's time anymore. You cannot pay for him to hop on a call. This is the time that you have available. What you guys have to do is drop your questions below. And like we said, we're going to be able to get to them at the end. We're going to start at the very top from the first question. So the faster you guys get your questions in there, the faster we'll be able to get to them. I cannot promise you that we will get to your question, but I'll promise you we'll get to as many as that we can, right? As Jay's grabbing this, like I said, drop them here below. And we'll be able to make sure that we get your guys' questions here. And guys, just so you know, whoever invited you to this training, I want you to go ahead and reach out to them after this. We don't want to start a million chats here in the bottom. What you guys want to do is just go ahead and reach out to the person who invited you to this. Make sure you thank them for it, because I know Jay is bringing the heat here. Make sure you reach out to him. And I believe Jay said he's going to be providing some materials as well to the individuals that invited you here. So in order to get access to some of those materials and to get access to some of that information, make sure you reach out to the individual that got you invited here. As Jay's coming back here, and Jay, we were just talking about, I believe you're gonna have some materials for the people who got invited here to the invitees.
Yeah, we'll give you all the downloads and all of the specific documents. Like, we're not gonna go through them line by line. You don't need to see that, but we'll get you access to all of this stuff at the end. So whoever it is that invited you to this, make sure you go back to them, and we'll get you a download of all this and some additional cool stuff. But I don't have the actual one I was looking for, but I'll just use an example. I've got a bunch of stuff in here. I don't know what all I've got in there, but there's a lot of goodies. But imagine this. So this is like a magazine tear sheet. And so what we created at NAEA was a magazine tear sheet where you're on the cover of a magazine, and on the inside we created the principles of this listing presentation I'm about to give you guys. And it's the same content. It doesn't change. So it's something that's duplicatable. I can train anybody to this one process, and you're going to use the same presentation as me. You're going to use everything that I use. And so, but this magazine tear sheet was important. And the way it came about was I went on an appointment, and this is years ago. I was young, a lot younger, quite a bit younger, 25 years in the business. So it's been, 20 years ago, at least 25 maybe. That was early on in my career. And I bought this thing called Broker Associate Magazine. You guys have seen Real Producers. That's a big thing everywhere these days or whatever. And you get on the cover of the magazine, you got to pay, whatever. It's kind of a bullshit deal. But at the same time, you have to understand how people come to trust. So everything we're doing, whether you want to be on the cover of the magazine or not, doesn't matter. You have to understand, how do people come to a position where they trust? And trust is created in a lot of different ways. One thing is, but when they see that if you see someone that's wrote a book and they have a book, you would assume that they must know something about, because they wrote a book, right? They're an expert in something, or they wouldn't have wrote a book.
Right.
Same thing with being on the cover of this magazine. So this magazine, this little tear sheet, I used it, and it was one that I paid a bunch of money to be on, Broker Associate Magazine. It's old. You have to be in the business a long time to know what that is. But it was just a little magazine tear sheet and whatever. And I watched people on the listing appointment look down and then look back up at me and treat me different the rest of the listing appointment. I was like, that's unbelievable. Like, they looked at me as a kid because I was, but then they looked at me different because I was on the cover of the magazine. I started to learn, looking back after I learned the principles, the reason was because they started to trust. There was credibility just in the fact that they saw me on the cover of the magazine. They didn't have to read it. They didn't even have to know what it said. Just the fact that I was on the cover of a magazine. And so these are little things that we do to try to move people to a place where they trust us, because they need to listen to us and ultimately listen to our advice and ultimately hire us. And so these are things that you can send out ahead of time. And so this is the question that you have to be asking: what am I sending out ahead of time to position me as the go-to expert that establishes my value prior to me getting there, so I don't have to go in and feel like I need to talk about all my accolades and all my awards and all the stuff that you did great to sell people, right? So that stuff goes out ahead of time. Pre-positioning, we use a video that does it for you. So we have a video that goes through this presentation I'm about to give, way better than I can give it even in a short period of time. And it's positioning you as the expert. And so, and it's through, we created the National Association of Expert Advisors. There's a certification, a certified home selling advisor. Once you become certified, when NAEA says you're an expert, that's better than you saying you're an expert. They don't need to know who NAEA is, but it's the positioning of them saying that you're a certified. We say you're a certified home selling advisor. We explain the process you use to sell homes for the most amount of money. So now your position is differently when you get there. So enough on that. So we'll move past that process. But just trust me, that's a big piece of how you show up on the appointment and how they perceive you when you get there. And so those are little things. So yeah, so that's the first step in the process. We want to jump on, or you have questions you want to poke holes at or ask?
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and ask them the questions that are in part of this process too. And I think the main basis is too, a lot of times too, nowadays with video, you can really build that authority before you even walk in the door. Where do they go? What videos do you send them before you even head over there? Right.
Yeah,
I'll tell you
absolutely.
what, that personalized video text is a great one that leads them into different places, just to build your authority and also build that rapport. Yep. One of the biggest things that we say about building rapport, dude, when we were in a call center, we had a 25% higher conversion rate when you sent a personal video text message before. Because now they know you're not like everybody else. You're not getting some schmucky thing. They were like, hey, Jay, good talking to you. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow at 4:00 at our listening appointment. Doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be massive. But let's see. First one here. How can we generate more seller leads? I think that's an entirely different topic in itself. As far as like the listing presentation.
Yep, absolutely. It's something we can touch on. It is a completely different animal.
Right. But let's touch on this one, because this is more so on basis to what you're talking about. So he went on a listing presentation and he was like interviewed 2 out of 3 different people. What would you do if you were not last?
I would. Well, first of all, I would go last. I would
ask the way you prep it before.
Yeah, it's just, in the seller counseling interview, we ask, is there anyone else you plan on interviewing before we come out to, before we come out and meet with you? And if they say yes, then say, oh, cool, it'd be okay if we go last. And so if you go last, and I mentioned this kind of talking fast, so I'm not surprised if anybody missed this, but if you go in, if you show up and you're not, and you find out they lied to you or you're not last, say you immediately set up the second appointment to come back and discuss price. All they care. Listen, you got to understand this. The only thing the seller wants, period, when they're meeting with you, is they want to know what you think the house is worth. That's it. That's all they're looking for. They're waiting for you to get through any process that you're doing, and they're trying to take you off of your process to get them the answer. What do you think it's worth? What do you think it's worth? What do you think it's worth? That's all they want to hear. And they want to hear that from 3 agents. And unfortunately, they're going to choose one based upon the one they like the most and the one that they gives them the price that they felt really the best about. And unfortunately, that is not a good way to win a listing, right? And it's not a good choice for a seller, especially moving into a market that's changing, just choosing an agent based on the one they like the best and the one that has the price that makes them the happiest. And so this is going to be, we're going to start to take a completely different approach as we get face to face and go into establishing our expertise. And it's really the biggest trust building aspect of the presentation. More important than anything, if you do all these next two steps, these first three steps right, the last step of the presentation becomes less important. It's still important, but you're likely going to win a higher percentage of these listings anyway, right? Yeah. And so we're going face to face. We have this information of the things they love about the home, anything they've replaced, or done repairs, any of those types of things. We know about what they think the house is going to sell for. And we're going into this listing appointment, and I didn't know what I was doing when I was doing this principally, but as I started to reflect and break down the principles, one of the things I did every single time I walked up to a house was I'd say, I'd introduce myself and I'd say, hey, who wants to give me the grand tour? And in doing that, one thing happens. The decision maker will either take you on the tour, or they will tell the other spouse who's not the decision maker to take you on the tour. And so instantly you identify who's the person kind of calling the shots in the real decision maker in the relationship. So who you need to convince the most. You still got to win both people over, but you know who's kind of the decision maker. So that was one of the things that I did. and this is a mistake I used to make. And then I start going through the house and start trying to take notes in this room and that room. And I'm like, it's a ceiling fan, it's got a closet, it's a bedroom. I don't know why I would do all these things, but I would take all these notes, and it's just pointless. They haven't hired you yet. We're not going to work yet. We're only going to preview this property with the goal of connecting and becoming the best friend of the individuals in the house. And if you're doing what Nick said, and you're sending videos ahead of time, it's helping build some rapport before you get there. But you're looking for things like I would literally look in, in the driveway, there's a Harley Davidson pickup. I know I can talk about Harley Davidsons, or there's a OU mailbox, Oklahoma Sooners, a Boomer Sooner. That's something I could talk about. So there's something I'm just looking for something I can connect with. Or there's, pictures on the wall, there's kids, there's books on shelves, there's all kinds of things and ways for you to connect. If you fail to find those things, if somebody tells you, or whoever does the seller counseling interview, that they put, they flew in Italian marble from Italy to redo their bathroom, and you walk into that bathroom and you say, you get out on the floor, is this Italian marble? Let me tell you what happens. Their eyes get this big and they're like, it is. How did you know? They get you make such a visceral connection with them. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of creepy, honestly, but they don't make the connection that this information was gathered on the front end. They just don't make that connection. They literally, it makes them feel good. And when you make people feel good, it's building rapport. So these are little things you're doing. If somebody replaced the hot water tank, so I had this situation happen to me on an appointment and then in my own house. And I had a hot water tank that was on an upper floor that busted. We had to move out of the house for 6 months. It was a freaking shit show, right? It was a miserable experience. But when I put in that tankless water, heater up there the next time, I was proud of it. And the same thing happened with this family. They had an ordeal with the hot water tank that busted. They put in tankless when tankless wasn't cool. And when they opened the closet, I knew that it was there because I had the seller counseling interview, but I said, is that a tankless water system? It is. And they're like, let me tell you what happened. And so even though they would tell my assistant all these things, the connection was just much, much better with them when I would use this information to really make a connection and build rapport. So it's not, I hate for it to sound a little bit creepy because it kind of does, but you're just trying to make a connection and really connect and become their best friend and be genuine, right? This isn't being fake. It's about being real and being genuinely interested in people and what they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish and trying to help them. And so if you do this, you'll have a connection and you'll know when that happens. And then you can move to this next phase. But I will caution you, do not move to the next phase until you do this with both parties. I've had just for shits and giggles, sometimes I would my dad had a Coldwell Banker that had Cardis business, and I would never take those referrals because I didn't like the referral fees. But he had one that had gone on, they had interviewed four or five, I think it was 4 agents. I think I was the 5th agent. They'd interviewed 4, they fired all 4, and they wanted somebody else. So my dad was like, I don't have nobody else to send them. Will you go on it? I said, oh, this ought to be fun just to see who the hell wants to interview 5 fucking agents anyway. And so I'm like, all right, I'll go. And so I pull up to the house and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a cakewalk. And this was the one actually I used earlier, the example of they had an OU mailbox and a Harley Davidson in the garage and Harley Davidson truck. I was like, cakewalk, got this one. And so I get there and all the stuff in the house is boxed boxed up, and the lady doesn't speak English, and she tells her husband to put me on the tour. So now I know she's the decision maker, but she's not coming with me on the tour. And so I made best friends with this guy, and I realized about halfway through this process that I was like, I know why everybody else didn't get the listing now, because nobody had ever made a connection with her. And so unbeknownst to me, now I didn't know what I was going to do, because I didn't know if she spoke English or not. And to my knowledge, she hadn't spoken any English since I've been there, and I didn't know any other language other than English. So I was just like, okay. So I sit down on the couch, because normally we're going to move to the kitchen table. But I sit down on the couch, and we just started talking about where they were moving, and she got excited, and they said, well, they were moving to Atlanta. They were moving to Buckhead, actually, a really nice area, part of Atlanta. Yeah. Yep. And she was really excited about it. Now that could have backfired on me. She could have hated the move and been miserable where they were going, and that would have backfired, and I probably would have lost the listing. So that's one that you kind of got to be careful for. But I was just reaching for straws, because I knew that I was going to lose if I didn't win her over, because she was definitely the shot caller. And so she got really excited, showed me online where they were moving to and all this kind of stuff. And now I'm like, checks in that box. Now we can move on to the next step. And this next step is a real transition. Okay. So we're going from being their best friends and them liking you to now taking control of the rest of the process, and positioning yourself as the doctor that's going to prescribe them with the solution. So we're going to,
and Jay, before we make that transition too, I think an important thing that you did there, that you were talking about on that story, right? That I don't know if everybody caught, right? But just making sure that when she said, why don't you show them around the house? And you're like, bam. Right there, I knew who the decision maker was.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
They might think just because he has the truck, the Harley, and everything in the house that, oh, that's got to be the decision maker. But that one thing of her saying, hey, why don't you take him around the house and show it, made you notice that she is the decision making filter, decision making maker in that relationship.
Yep. And I'll give you another example of how just having this awareness in the very beginning is important. I went on one other listing appointment that I remember. I'm sure I may have done it once before, or many times before, but one other that was like 5 people that had gone before me, or 3 or 4 people that went before me. I remember I walked in the house, and she was really nice, really likable. It was a single mom. And she takes me right as she's taking me right into the kitchen, and I can see, I'm not making this up. It was canary yellow with hunter green inlays in the cabinets. Okay. I mean, it was hideous. It was horrible. And it just jumps right out at you. And I'm right I was about to say, we're going to have to paint these cabinets. Right. She says to me, the last agent didn't like my cabinets I just painted, and that's why I didn't list my house. But then I was like, yeah, every agent that came before me said the same thing.
Said the same exact thing. We're painting over those things. Yeah.
And so you got to be careful not to start telling people, hey, we should do this, we should do that, because they haven't decided to hire you yet. We don't go to work until we don't want to give away some of the value that we do have in our expertise until the right time. And so in this situation, I would have put my foot in my mouth and been right out the door. Yeah. Now later on, let me explain how I tell her she's got to paint the cabinets, because she still had to paint the cabinets. That was right. So I told her, I said, listen, and as we're discussing things that you can do, to sell the home for the most amount of money, I said, do you want to sell your house at the bottom of the market, middle of the market, or the top of the market? She said, well, I want to sell it at the top of the market. I said, okay, well, market research shows that homes that are painted in neutral colors tend to attract offers higher than homes that don't have neutral colors. Now, I love your cabinets. I would love for you to paint my cabinets the same color. I think it's beautiful. But market research shows that that we probably should paint these if you want to attract the highest offer, which you told me is
only if you want to attract the highest offer.
Right. And so now it's not me being the bad guy, right? It's me leveraging Mr. Bad Guy market research. That hey, in alignment with what you told me is important to you, this is what we should do. And now you're giving advice in a way that they're not feeling like you're attacking them, and they're not hearing it differently. Right. And so your best friend, market research shows. Little tip there. So now we're into this transition. Right. So we gathered all this information. We've prepared for the appointment appropriately. We didn't get into a whole lot of that, but do your homework, know your shit. Get there. You've built a rapport with both parties. Now it's time for us to establish your authority. And this is the hardest part, right? Like, how do you make the value visible, right? If somebody asks you today, think about this. If somebody asks you today as an agent, well, what do you do to earn this 6% commission, right? Like, it's like, we do a lot. Like it's very difficult for us to articulate and make visible the value that we bring to the table, right? And so, you know, I'm going to give you the keys to the keys to the kingdom on that here in a second. But so it's really hard to get people to understand the value. Why shouldn't I just hire that guy for less, right? And so at this point, we're going to take that down. And so as I start laying things on the table, this is one of the places where I use the magazine tear sheet, and I lay it on the table. And you literally, I said, this is good bathroom reading material. If you get bored, this is, it's Real Estate Experts Today. It's a magazine article. It goes over the principles I'm going to talk to you. Same things, principles that were in the video I sent you ahead of time. If you've got a chance to watch. And so they see it. That's it. That's all I wanted to do. They saw it. Now another notch in the belt of credibility for you, another notch in the belt of trust being built for you. And that's the purpose it serves, nothing more, right? They're never going to read it.
Just to be clear, that tear sheet, like that cover is just there to build the authority to look at you, see you on the cover, and look up. Whether it's the tear sheet or something else that you use out there, definitely recommend the tear sheet, which will send you the material after this. Whoever invited you will have that list of what to do. But that's what it's there for. It's not for them to spread through. It's not for you to go through and say, hey, did you see me on the cover?
You don't explain it. Yeah.
Right. No explaining it.
You actually, you discount it to a large degree. You just kind of discount it as
no big deal.
And so it accomplishes the goal. When you understand, we're just trying to get them to come to trust us, and understanding that some people trust based upon things they see, and you look more trustworthy. Yeah. And so that's a step you don't want to skip. So I would lay those things down, and I would say this. So this is one of the biggest nuggets this is like one of the biggest writer downers nuggets you're going to get today. So whenever I start laying things down, I say, it's funny, when I got into real estate, they used to teach me to do this thing called a CMA. And I do literally like a CMA. I said, have you ever had anybody show you a CMA? And they're like, yeah, usually they'll say like the last two agents gave us CMAs. I said, unfortunately, when you look at a CMAs look backwards based upon market conditions that were different than today. And they pull up properties that sold, and we don't know why they sold. We don't know if somebody was a fire sale. We don't know if there were hoarders. We don't know if it was a rental property. We don't know why they may have sold. We don't know if the agent gave them a really low price. We don't know if they were a good negotiator or bad negotiator. We do not know why those houses sold for what they sold for. They're evidence of maybe value, but they certainly don't help us to price and position your home to attract the highest offer in today's market. Does that make sense? And let me tell you what every single seller says. Yeah, that makes sense. You're not hiring me. I don't believe you're hiring me here today to determine, based on sales that happened 3 months ago, 6 months ago, to determine what your house is going to sell for. I believe that you're hiring me to help you price and position and package your home to attract the highest offer in today's market. Is that right? So yeah, so it would be like looking in the rearview mirror to try to drive forward. That's not how we help you sell for the most amount of money. And so now that makes total logical sense, right? And I know what everybody's asking. Well, what the hell do you do if you don't do a CMA, right? You do something different. You don't call it a CMA, okay? We call it a market absorption analysis. This is just understanding a different language than, I'm one of these that, and I've lived by this. It's one of the principles I live by. Again, another Dan Kennedyism is money moves to difference, not similarity. If everyone else does the same damn thing, stop doing that, do something different. Make it different, because if we look like everyone else, we're a commodity. If we look like everyone else, then we're not Starbucks. We're just a cup of coffee. And if you want to be packaged and priced and be able to attract the most amount of commission, what you deserve, I believe, if you're really truly an expert, then you have to be different than everyone else. Everyone else does a CMA. If I was to survey all of you, probably all still do CMAs. And it's not a bad thing, but the way we position and the way that we communicate what we do is differently. Is how you start to create a defining gap between you and every other person they've ever met with or talked to about real estate. And so these are all part of that process. And so again, so this is the death of the CMA, we call it. It's an archaic tool that maybe a few agents that are still in their 80s use, but this is not how we determine how to price and position your home to attract the highest offer in the market today. And that makes sense to them, right? And so they're now
that's just really quick. That's what you say while you're on the listing presentation.
Yeah, I'm not even sat down yet. I'm literally getting my stuff out and setting stuff down. Like, it's funny. I used to do this thing called a CMA, right? Like, I'm just doing it. I mean, it's literally like, you
make it seem like it's such common knowledge that you should not use it. It's not even sitting down and breaking it down. It's just like, dude, if anyone's using like CMA,
I'm making fun of it. I'm like, it's a funny thing. When I got my license, they used to show me this thing. They used to have an MLS book too, by the way, right? Like, I'm literally now. This is important. It's a subtle way. If I was to sit down and say, well, any agent that gives you a CMA, they're an idiot. Because that's not the way you do it. Now you look like an asshole, and you can't talk bad about your competition.
Absolutely.
But you can, this is how you do it without doing it, right?
Right.
So what you're doing is you're creating a shadow and a cloud of doubt over everything else that person may have said while they were on that appointment. You literally destroyed the case that they are making for why they should be hire them, what price they said, everything they said now in their mind is completely discounted because that logically it doesn't make sense. They get a CMA.
Man, and I'll tell you what, I think that's where with that one little piece, that tonality key is so important, where you say it in such common knowledge that everybody who's anybody in the real estate industry that keeps up to date knows that the CMA is extinct. It doesn't even exist. Right. It doesn't even work. But like you said, you say it standing up. This is not sitting down like a serious tone. It's just common knowledge. Like if someone's using a CMA,
I'm just talking about like, man, these real estate agents,
I can't believe them.
Can't believe the ones that still use this. It's such an archaic tool.
And you know what they're going to do? Now, smile and nod. Like, of course, you're right. Jay.
Right. Like, I mean, when you really listen to what I'm saying, like, you're right. You're exactly right. It makes total sense, absolutely. Right? Yeah. And that's what they do. They're generally like, yeah, that's right. Okay? Right. Like, and then they start looking at each other. I can tell they're like, no, that money did a damn CMA. You can see the little self-talk between them, half the time. Right. And so now at this point, I'm saying, hey, let's go through our seller counts and interview real quick. I just want to review your goals, your timelines. It's important for you to have a timeline, because if you don't have a timeline, you can't work backwards from how to get to that goal, right? So if somebody doesn't have a timeline, then there's nobody that ever lists a house that has a goal of selling it for longer than 90 days. So we automatically default to at least 90 days. So if they don't give me a date that they want to be moved by and a reason why, then listen, the default's 90 days. Like, there's no reason your house to be on the market longer than 9 days. Maybe we'll sell faster than that, but let's reverse engineer a goal to get to this point by this time frame, and we come to an agreement on what that is. And so at this point, I also want to know, and this is where you ask deeper questions. Why are you doing it? Why do you want to do it? What happens if it doesn't sell? What happens if we're not able to accomplish that? What would you do? You start to really uncover some of the pain associated with if you don't hit the goal. And this is, again, guys, I get it. Every house is getting 15 offers, but that shit's changing, y'all. If you don't know it's coming, it's coming. And when it changes, it don't just change. It changes like a ball rolling off the table changes, like dramatic change in the marketplace, and it is coming. And so that's going to start to happen. And it's going to be really important that the seller listens to you about everything you have to say, because they're going to want to be way up here and that shit ain't going to fly no more. And then you're going to be trying to get price reductions and you'll never catch the market going downhill. And so, this will be important to how you advise them and them actually listening, because you're going to have to tell people something they don't want to hear because they weren't ready for it. And so at this point, I tell them, I said, listen, guys, based on everything, that you've told me, there's no question I can help you guys get your house sold so you can get to Houston to see those grandkids and by November. And if it's okay with you guys, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Are you okay with that?
Can you say that again, Jay? Because I know that's really important right there.
Yeah. So based on everything that you guys have shared with me, there's no question I can help you guys insert their goal, timeline, and reason why.
And that's the importance of asking those questions. So you can insert exactly what they want to hear. Yep.
Right. And this is for what you want, right? Like, this is like a doctor, right? Like, it's a doctor prescribing, right? This is like, listen, I'm going to give you the advice that you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Are you okay with that? This is what they say. Right.
Of
like
course.
now they're expecting you. Yeah. They've given you they've given you the control, and they are now giving you the trust to tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. Now, this is where everybody else messes up moving forward. Okay. This is this is where, if you do all this part right and you do this next part right, you're going to screw it up. So now we're going to start looking at the what's going on in the marketplace. And this is where you're going to start. First thing, write this down. I can't give you this. I don't even have there's probably an affiliate code. I don't even use it, but keeping current matters. If you're not using keeping current matters, keeping current matters is the dopest, baddest ass data that you could ever have as a real estate agent. They take all of the main sources of everything from the Fed, the Case-Shiller, all the best assets and resources about what's going on in the market, what people are expecting to happen, what's really truly going on the global macro level. And they break it all down. They give you all these slides, and these are freaking amazing to do. You can do 10 videos off of one of these monthly videos they give you. They tell you how to use it if you're talking to a buyer, how to use it if you're talking to a seller, shadow inventory, or whatever's going on in foreclosures, and foreclosures are up by this percent. What's going on with the interest rate? How's that going to impact purchasing power? All of these things that people just don't know, right? Like, they don't really know. They watch whatever they watch. They watch CNN or they watch Fox, but they don't really know what the hell's going on in the marketplace. And this is the 10,000 foot view. Okay. This is
Yeah.
where nobody goes. Okay. Most agents come in, they start talking about neighborhood data. They start talking about themselves. They're selling this, that, and the other about themselves, where they start, getting into price and how to price and position their house. And then ultimately it's like, I think it'll sell for this. Right. And that's all they were waiting for. So if you do that, you're dead in the water if they don't like your price. Bad decision, right? We don't want them to make a decision based on if they like you the most or if it's price. We want them to hire you because they believe you have the system that's proven and repeatable to sell their home for the most amount of money, put the most money in their pocket. Right. That's what they say yes to that, then they said yes to everything else. So at this point, we're now, we're now going over this data, and there's a point in which this will happen. You'll see that their eyes start to kind of glaze over and they're like, this person who they know what they're talking about. I don't know. They seem to have their shit together. And so again, nobody goes over this data. And a lot of it's really important as to how we're going to advise them and whatever their goal is. And if they should sell it now, not sell it now, sell it and get the heck out of here, keep it as a rental, whatever their options are, and to advise them properly. And so, at this stage, next thing we do, we use, there's a lot of different tools out there. I like this one called Real Market Reports. You can go to realmarketreports.com and they'll customize through your MLS. You'll give them your MLS. They'll pull a report and send it to you as often as you like. I did mine weekly, and it gives you a really good graphic of inventory based upon price brackets. And within that, how many homes are on the market, how many sold the last 6 months, what the pending ratio is, which, by the way, if you want to really understand your marketplace, look at pending ratios. Pending ratios are how many homes, based on the number of homes that are active, how many of those are, what percentage of that is also under contract. So if you got a really high pending ratio, if 50% of the homes that are on the market, let's say there's 100, if there's 50 that are under contract in that same price bracket in a given area, then that shit's moving pretty fast, right? That means that you basically have 1 month's worth of inventory. And so that's the real telltale. That's the truth teller in the marketplace is pending ratio. So that's also on this as well. So it gives you an idea in their price bracket or whatever. And so this is where that question on the seller counseling interview comes in. If they tell you, because let me give you the example of what happens, and you tell me if if anybody can shake their head if this is happening to them. So I come in and say, okay, well, let's look at your price bracket, from 250 to 350, and I start showing them that price bracket of this data, this cohort of data, and they stop and they sit back, and we just went from being good friends to not being friends, and I have to stop because I know I lost them, something happened. And they were like, well, we were thinking it was worth at least 425, weren't we, honey? 425. That's what we were thinking. So now I look like they lost I destroyed all the trust, all the authority, all of the rapport that's been built to this point because I didn't include the number in their mind, whether it's relevant or not, it doesn't matter. But I didn't include that in my cohort of data that I'm showing them to come to a position on price. And so I learned that people have stupid ideas about what they think their house is worth, and it doesn't really matter, but you can't mess up the process of building rapport and authority by not including that. And so I'm going to include, so I'm going to include up to 450 on that cohort of data. Even it doesn't matter. We're going to get in the weeds later. Okay. But I'm going to include that cohort of data, and they're going to be like, okay. And they're going to be happy. We're going to go along. And then I'm going to break down that data. And there's a document we'll give you that we use for this. And it's something I created just because I'm trying to do two things. This is what we're all should be trying to do. We're trying to get them to understand how many homes are going to sell in the time frame in the time frame they want to sell, and how many homes aren't going to sell. Because the reality is there's going to be homes that don't sell in that time frame, even if you're in the fastest market on the planet. You're going to have homes that didn't sell in 30 days if 30 days was their goal. And if a home that didn't sell, and how many aren't going to sell, and then there's going to be new houses that hit the market too. Those homes are also part of this equation. And so we do the math to understand, listen, you said you want to be gone by June 30th. And in that time frame, it looks like there's 120 houses on the market. There's going to be 10 more per month that come on the market. So we got, let's say it's 200 homes on the market, and it looks like 60 of them are going to sell. So that means, what does that mean? And I asked that question. So what does that mean? Simple math, 100 and whatever it is, 140 houses aren't going to sell, right? That means 140 houses aren't going to sell in the time frame you want to be sold in your price bracket, and only this many are. So let me ask you a question, guys. What do you think we need to do to be one of the 60 that sell, not one of the 140 that didn't sell? And then shut up and don't say a word, and just wait. And they'll regardless, because you asked the question, they're going to answer it in their own mind was, well, we better fix that fucking porch, or we better price it right, or we better do what we should be. We better do what we
paint those damn cabinets.
Right. So it's like anytime you ask a question, if I tell everybody, don't think about an elephant, your brain doesn't know how to not do that. Right. Your brain, everybody's like, don't think about an elephant. I'm thinking about an elephant. Why am I thinking about an elephant? So like you're that question in and of itself gets them to, now you're playing on the same team, right? Like we're sitting here together,
you're on the
discovering what do we think? What do we guys? Hey guys, what do you think we need to do to be one of the homes that sell and not one of the homes that don't?
So just to be clear on this process too. So you write their number down no matter what, just to be on the same team too. So right at the beginning, when you ask how much you think it'll sell for, you write that down, and then you go to the market reports, and then you go again. The market reports are the bad guy. You're on the same side. Like I'll say, hey, I want you to sell for that much too. But we also want your home to sell by this time.
Now, by the way, you may do this. I mean, this is about being accurate, right? Like this is about being a really good expert advisor and giving people advice. If I pulled up in that price bracket, even with that ridiculous price that's maybe not as relevant, and I see that there's less than 30 days worth of inventory, I'm gonna say, listen, guys, this is an opportunity for us to really be aggressive in our strategy to attract the highest offer. I said, this is where I see most sellers leaving money on the table. They don't understand that now the market is really ramping up, and we can achieve something more than maybe what anyone else has achieved, maybe significantly more. And we're going to really go for that because there's no reason for you not to, based on the inventory I'm seeing. And I can get them excited about that. And now it's not, oh, well, my house is going to sell no matter what anyways. Now that they see, oh, you're trying to get me above market. You're trying to get me to a place that no CMA would have shown that I'm worth, right? And, as we all know today, I mean, the appraisals are starting to shift now, but for the last couple of years, really didn't matter. There's enough cash buyers, there was enough, financing to get deals done, and buyers that would come out of pocket with cash because they were coming from markets where they sold their house for a shit ton of money, and they had cash, they would pay the difference, and no inspections, none of this, that, and the other. So like, that is a good opportunity. This historic market that's starting to shift.
Right.
It was a time for you to position yourself as a way to even put more money in their pocket because you understand the market and how to price and position homes to attract the most money. You guys all make sense? Now, as the market shifts, we're going to be having different conversations. If you haven't had them yet, you'll start to have them in this year, or for sure the next, where you go out there and they think it's worth more. And now you got to get them, talk them off the ledge. It sucks, man. It was way better to go into a house and tell them, hey, shit, it's worth way more than you thought it's worth. It sucks to go in and have to talk them down from what they were hoping it was worth. That's a lot harder conversation. So this process becomes really important in that scenario. And so when I'm showing them, what do we think we need to do? And it's not me saying, listen, all they're going to want to ask you next, by the way, is, well, what do you think it's going to sell for? They're going to stop you in your process and they're going to look you dead in the face and be like, well, what do you think it's going to sell for? I said, we're going to get to that. Before we get to that, let's kind of take a look at this data. And I want to kind of go through the presentation of what we do to sell homes for the most amount of money. And then we're going to get into specifically where we want to price and position the home. Okay. And so I'm going to punt that down the road a little bit because they want to talk. That's all they want to hear. Because once they hear price, they go deaf and they don't hear anything else you say. But so far now, if I told them, if I did a CMA and it was printed out and it said 230, right?
That's it. It's over.
You're dead. Like you're dead. They thought it was 240. They already don't like you anymore. You walk out of that listing and when you're on your way to the car, you're like, fuck, I'm not getting that listing.
You ain't winning that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it sucks, man. I hated that feeling. And so I did it enough times that I stopped doing it. Right. And so now we're like, hey guys, I got them in the right frame of mind based upon what I believe the market conditions are, good or bad. It doesn't matter, but I've got them on. I've asked them the question and put it into their mind that, hey, in order for you to be one of the houses selling, not one that doesn't, then we're going to probably need to, whatever that needs to be is already playing, and that song's already playing in their mind. Right. And so now this is a transition statement to the presentation. Okay. So similar to the transition as we get started, based on everything you guys share with me, there's no question I can help you guys get the house sold, and get you guys moved to Houston to see those grandkids. And I'd like to show you how we're going to do that. Is that okay? And so now we've moved to presentation. Now keep in mind, we did this high level price, high level market data. We did a bracket of price. We didn't get down to neighborhood and all that in the weeds, right? Like that's where they get you. That's where they get you cornered and it's checkmate, and they want to know what you think it's worth. So we stayed away from that. We stayed a little higher level, and we hovered right past that. And now we're transitioning to the value proposition. What is it you're going to do to help them sell their home for the most amount of money? And we're going to get them to say yes about 7 times in this presentation. It can be done in 10 minutes. It can be done in an hour if they're analytical, they'll wear your ass out. But you can use presentation in a very short period of time. And so essentially, now I've made this transition, and I say, it's funny, when you get into real estate, a lot of sellers don't know this, but actually, historically, 44% of homes that go on the market actually don't sell in the time frame the seller wants it to sell, even in markets that are like today. And so, another thing that I thought was interesting is that the average agent, you know how long it takes the average agent to get licensed in the state of Texas or wherever you're from? They say, well, they'll make up a number. He's like, no, actually, it only takes it takes 90 hours to get a license. 90 hours. So what the average real estate agent, number of homes the average agent sells per year, they'll give you a number. It'll be way more than 6. So the average agent only sells 6. And so one of the things that we've determined is we want to be of the highest value and have the best process we can to help sellers sell for the most amount of money. The average agent only invests about $238 a month on marketing and tools to improve to help you get your home sold. We're going to do a whole lot more than that. So we've got essentially what we determined, there's over 115 variables involved in the home selling process. And it's how these variables are managed that's going to determine whether you attract a high offer or you attract a low offer. You guys want to attract a high offer? And they'll be like, yeah, we'll attract a high offer. Yeah. And like they'll literally, move your head with you, like follow your gestures and say, so let me show you how we're going to do that. We have a proven repeatable system that's backed by market research to sell homes for up to 18% more than the methods of traditional real estate agents. I'd like to show you how we're going to do that. And so we go into, and then I ask them another question. So have you ever heard of the price swing effect? Oh, no, because I made that up.
Price swing effect.
Price swing effect. So the price swing effect is there are homes that sell at the very bottom of the market, even in the best of times or in the worst of times. There are houses that sell at the bottom of the market, middle of the market, and the top of the market. Would you guys agree with that? I think everybody would agree with that.
Yeah.
A foreclosure, a house that, a hoarder, it smells like cat piss, it's going to still sell. It may sell, but it's still going to sell at the bottom of the market. It's going to attract lower offers than houses that are really price positioned and packaged in a way to attract a higher offer. Everybody agrees with that. Everybody, it makes sense, right? Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to help you manage these variables to make sure that you attract a high offer instead of a low offer. Does that make sense? And so I'm not going to go through every single piece of the presentation. This is literally like a core training that we do that, it takes a day for us to get you trained on. But as we go through this, there's one or two things, and I want to give this because I did mention it on the beginning. So I'm going to give this one nugget that I love. There's two things that people don't talk about on the listing appointment. And one is I by all means want to charge the most. I want to be the most valuable, but I am not the cheapest, and I'm not going to discount. And damn it, if you ask me to discount, I lose my shit. I want, by all standards necessary, I want you to be so blown away by the end of this presentation. You say, what is this going to cost me? Which is what a lot of people will say. And so as we go through this presentation, one of the things is the law of cooperation. So, it's interesting that a lot of real estate agents don't understand this, but did you know that 71% of all sales come from a cooperative sale from another agent? And they'll be like, no, I didn't know that. So as much as I'm going to spend, and I've already talked about all the marketing we do ahead of this, but as much as I would love the buyer to contact us, what we know is that a lot of buyers are going to be in contact with other agents. So we're actually going to allocate part of our marketing budget towards marketing to agents that represent buyers, significantly the buyers agents that represent home sales in this area. Does that make sense? And I know you would never do this, but I get calls all the time with sellers that their home didn't sell for whatever reason. They're frustrated. They call me, and I go into the MLS and I'll look and see what marketing was done, and oftentimes I'll notice something that is the dead giveaway as to one of the reasons why it didn't sell. And that is that they are offering less commission to the agent that would bring the buyer. And so, for instance, if an agent offers to do it for less commission, I know you guys would never fall for this, so I'm not saying that you would fall for it, but I'm telling you a lot of sellers do make this mistake. When an agent offers to do it for less percent or whatever, they're also offering less to the agent that might be representing the buyer. If we know that our largest target market is 71% of those agents, 71% of the sales come from those agents, the last thing we want to do is we want to cut their commission by 20 or 30% before they even show the property. The agent is controlling, whether they're going to see this property or that property. And so, like I said, I know you guys would never fall for that, but agents that are offering to do it for a discount are really doing a disservice to the seller if you want to attract the highest offer in a marketplace. Does that make sense? Like, you would not want to go to work tomorrow and work at a discount, would you? No. Okay, well then that's why you would never do that. And so, like I said, I know you wouldn't fall for it. Now, again, what I'm saying there is, like, I know you guys are smart and you would never fall for that and you would never do that. it's really, really hard for somebody after you say that to ask for a discount later, right? So keep in mind, I haven't talked about commission.
Right.
And so if they ask me what I charge, say, listen, our commission is flexible. All of this is involved in what we do.
Yeah.
We'll cover that once we get to the end, because I don't want them to choose me on commission. I don't want them to choose me on, I want them to choose me because they believe I have the system to sell their home for the most amount of money. And so as we go through this, as I get through each of these, there's a law of buyer acquisition, law of negotiation, a law of execution, all of these things that are principle based that every one of us do and manage either with a team or without a team, but we all manage these variables. Some of us we do better than others probably. But at the end of this, at each one of these pillars, I say, does you see how that could help your home to sell for an additional 3 to 5% more? And they'll say yes. Next one, say it again. So do you guys see how this system, if executed, would help your home to sell for, you know, an additional up to 18% more than how other agents are managing the sale of properties? They say yes. Okay, now they just hired you, right? So now they've hired you, and this is the mistake a lot of people make at this point. They're like, holy shit, now what? Now you tell them what to do. Now you tell them what to do.
Yes.
You tell them what to do. You say, listen, based on everything we've discussed in your timeline, what I think we need to do is we need to determine how do we want to price and position the home, and we need to get this thing listed tonight or as soon as possible, or we need to start the process today. And that's it. So that's a whole lot of information. I expect that, you know, probably people's heads are about to explode, but it's a process. You can learn this process. It's something we teach. We created a done for you system for all of this where you don't have to create it. So this is the presentation. Everybody that's a certified home sale advisor, many of the top agents in the world all use this system, and it works. And so it's just a simplified process. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. If it's something that you want to get trained on and be a part of, we'll give you some of the downloads and stuff. But if you want to become a part of this, get back to the person that invited you to this. Yep. And we'll show you how we can do that together.
So guys, yeah, Jay, I first want to thank you for your time. We have a couple questions here that we'll get through. We'll get through as many as we can, but I just want to emphasize, if you guys want the downloadable, some of the things that Jay was talking about, make sure you reach out to the person who invited you. We're giving them the information. You'll be able to receive it from them. So Jay, just get into some of these questions, because I know your time is valuable. Like I said, you literally can't pay to get on a call with Jay Kinder right now. So I appreciate you hopping on here for all of us.
I'm accessible, man. I love helping people. So it's all good. Yeah. Don't make me have to be more than I am. I enjoy this stuff.
All right, Mr. Dan Kennedy. All right. So here we go. As a new agent, how do you present yourself of your services if you don't have much experience?
Yeah. So great. Yeah. So the first thing as a new agent, man, you have to gain market knowledge. So like on a daily basis, you should be pulling up, the data, looking at trends, get comfortable with it, because your confidence is more the challenge than anything, right? Like, do you really know what you're talking about or not? And you can't fake that. So every day look at inventory, every day look at penny ratios, start to become an expert of what's going on in each price bracket. I started doing that early on in my career. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just like, I don't know, I better know what the hell I'm talking about. So I started trying to understand the market statistics, and I did them on a regular basis. And I started sending them out to people. My banker, it ended up crazy. We did this. We were sending out all these market data statistics. Yeah. And I found out later that the bank, my bank was using it in their board of directors meetings with all these leaders in my community. They were using my market statistics that we did weekly, and they were using it in making decisions in real estate loans in the bank. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, that's great. But think of the positioning, right? Like, my data is getting distributed because no one else was doing it. And this is you establishing expertise. This is why you get keeping current matters. You become an expert so you can advise people. If people don't know there's projected to be 10 more rate hikes over the course of the year, then you can't really advise a buyer to make the best decision on this new 7% loan they might not want to take. But that's these are the things that in order for you to really be an expert, you have to really on the daily, I think mindset daily, you have to work on in real estate, and being an expert daily, you have to work on. And so, becoming an expert, that's the key thing. Outside of that, this process that I'm talking about, you don't have to have done it 4,000 times. You just have to have a process. Because if I ask everybody on the call, say, can you explain to me what your process is based on the principles of how you're going to sell my home for the most amount of money? Most of us would be, yeah, sure. We're going to struggle through that, right? That's the difference, right? That's where the value became visible, is when I showed them I had a system for managing all the variables that determine what's going to attract the high offer and what's going to attract the low offer. Wow. That's what they're saying yes to. And so you can learn that system whether you're new, or you can learn that system, you can get trained to become an expert, on a process to sell them for the most amount of money, or you can wing it, which is what I did for 10 years probably before I
learned the
figured
hard
all this
way.
out. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think that's where also, if you do the videos like we were talking about, you have the tear sheets walking into there and you've practiced the system enough, you're going to sound like an expert. You're going to have the tear sheets to make you look like an expert. Therefore, you are an expert. Team Lance, can you go ahead and unmute? I'm not sure about this. I saw you ask this question a couple of times. So Team Lance says, where were you getting your invites to be invited to give your proposal to list the home? Does that make sense to you, Jen? Right, so
a lot of us agents spend a lot of money with Zillow, with realtor.com. We put out a lot of dollars and we're not really getting good leads. So where is that good lead coming from, Jeff?
I got a little something for that too, but go ahead.
Yeah. So I am not a fan of Zillow. I am not a fan of realtor.com. I'm not a fan of anybody who does arbitrage, lead arbitrage by having eyeballs and selling you back those people based upon our listings, especially. That's just crazy. But yeah, I don't, they're selling this stuff for a ton of money. And I've done it all, bought it all, and you can return on investment, almost all of it. But I think you have to commit in this business to really learning marketing and learning positioning and learning how to attract rather than chase. And so there's a lot of ways to do that. Nick is an expert at this as well, in building your brand. But as far as like buying leads, I can tell you, I can show you how to buy leads. I can show you how to buy a higher quality buyer lead with a new construction funnel that I could build to find new construction buyers, niched, that will be at a lower cost, let's say $2 to $5 per lead, or you can go buy the same lead or lower quality, not specific, not so specific that they've actually determined they want new construction in this city, right? Lead from Zillow or lead from realtor.com. And you're going to have 10 of those to convert one, whereas you might have to have 4 to convert one that was, through this particular funnel, right? And so, cost per lead, and then cost per sale. You have to understand, if I've asked everybody on here, let's say your average commission, let's just use this average as 10 grand, just for simple numbers. So how many of you are willing to spend $1,000 to have a $10,000 commission? I hope all of you would have said, hell yeah, I'll give you $1,000 if you give me $10,000. That's a good return on investment. And so, in getting listings, it is more expensive to generate a quality lead. And you might have to talk to more people if it's a lower cost lead to find somebody who's willing to sell and ready to sell right away. It's a much different game. However, I will tell you, it is the number one thing that you should be shifting to, is trying to focus on building your listing inventory, becoming the Incredible Hulk in a puddle, and becoming the most seen, known person in a particular area, the geographic area, a niche, lakefront, golf course community, whatever it is. Find that thing that you love, and like the people that like, maybe it's a community of age bracket community, or maybe it's first time home buyers, or whatever the case may be. But find that thing that you really like. Like if you're a lake person and you love selling on lake, sell all lakefront properties. Become that go-to person for lakefront, and start to become the Incredible Hulk in a puddle, as opposed to this big, huge marketplace of holy shit, I'll sell a house anywhere. Find that niche that you're going after, start there, and then build it from there.
Yeah, and I think a big part about that.
I'm sorry. I'm going to one more question. I'm not new. I've been doing this since 2004, back and forth between new home sales and resales. But my niche, my area, my people are seniors. And a lot of these seniors, although they do have some online presence, it's a lot of mailing, it's a lot of knocking doors, and people don't even want you at their door anymore. So, because they're afraid. So it's difficult right now.
I'll tell you what, a good mailing strategy that I know my brother came up with this one. It was freaking genius. So like the mailing strategy that he did is put something heavy when you're mailing it out in the envelope that you're mailing it to.
Ooh,
put something heavy in there, and then also put like a $5 scratch off. You want to talk, if you want to talk about old people sitting around, scratch offs are a big thing, right? A $5 scratch off and something a little bit heavy to get them to open it. Because you know what everybody does when they're going through their mail? They're throwing it. Bill, and then all of a sudden something's heavy. They're like, what the hell's in here? So they're going to look in it, and you got to scratch off in there with your information. You're going to clean up that older.
That is a genius idea. And
thank you.
We learned this is it's called lumpy mail.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and this is an OG strategy. But like we used to man, I'm trying to think of the best one we did. We had one, we lived in a military community, so we put little army men into the envelope, which is just an awkward shaped thing,
like,
right?
what the hell is in
And,
there?
right. And so because we were mailing specifically to military, and I can't remember the message and the call to action, but it was that this is understanding marketing is understanding market message to market match.
Yeah.
Right. And if you nail those two pieces, and you can do that with lump email, the open rate goes through the roof, the response rate goes through the roof, everything gets better. And so like, this is a kind of an example of one of the things that we would mail out to agents or whatever, and it has a CD or DVD in it, but it's got the branding kind of on the front, that kind of thing. But I have some lump email here somewhere. I don't know. I got boxes of shit everywhere, but yeah, that is a great strategy for sure.
Yeah.
Get creative.
Get creative. And I'll tell you what, as far as like the getting listings portion of it too, there's a difference between marketing and branding that a lot of people I don't think understand. The best way to explain it is like marketing is like a guy like this. I was listening to this guy on a podcast talk about it. He's like, marketing is like not caring what you look like, not caring what you smell like, not doing your hair, getting any clothes, walking to a bar and just buying everybody in there a drink and just hoping for the best. But branding is making sure you get your hair right, making sure you worked out, making sure you get everything right. So you buy one person a drink, and that's what you want to do. So as far as branding goes, a lot of times people want to build a brand and have the winning parts of a brand, but not willing to put in the effort. Building a brand takes time, but you know what? When times get tough, what do people do? They go to the brand they trust, right? So when you build a brand, when you do these videos, when you do things consistently, people will end up going to you over and over again. But Jay, Casey,
Nick, let me piggyback on what you're saying there too.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to dispel a little bit of a rumor. Okay, so okay. I believe Team Lance, you mentioned that that a lot of 55 and over aren't on social media. And my 96-year-old great grandmother would like to beg to differ with you, because I can tell you right now, she watches every single story that I do, no matter. And if I don't, she's messaging me, asking me why I haven't posted something today, because that's how she follows me and my life and the grandkids, the great grandkids, and everything else. And so I would suspect, if nothing else, they're following everything, they're following on social media. They're on social media. They're there. And one of the things that you want to do, again, and this is one of those things that's hard to do because we haven't made a decision of who we're for and who we stand for, who we're really trying to work for to create content around. And this is another thing that's right up Nick's Avenue, but you want to be I am the 55 and older expert. If you want to live in a 55 and up community, I am the go-to expert. I'm doing a video today where I'm out here at this community. I'm going to share with you the pros, the cons, what people like. I'm going to interview guests. Like you put that content out there, and some people are going to see it and they're like, not for me. But the person that is for is going to be like, hold on a second. Who is this? What is that? That's exactly what I was looking for. And you will create an audience of people that are looking for what you're doing. You have to determine you're not for everybody. And you're going to say some things like, oh man, that this seller might not want to hear that or that part. No, the tuning fork is tuned to who is exactly that is for. And so this is, and it's all mediums, right? Like it's not about TV, radio, YouTube, all these different, these are all media ways for you to distribute a message. But if you're doing radio, and this was an example I had in my marketplace, we did radio to a really high level, and there was 55,000 listeners, but at 8 a.m. or really 7:50 when my spot would play, it was a fixed spot rotation, fixed in rotation, first out of a live read, so it sounded as if I was live with them in the studio, and it was recorded. But it came out of a live read right to me, and we would do an interview. And there was 15,000 listeners every single day on K-Law that listened at 7:50, whether they were brushing their teeth at home or they were in the car and they were driving over the bridge on the way to their office. They would hear me at the same time every day. And so after a course of time, it was about my third week of doing radio, which normally radio, they would have said, here, we're gonna give you run a schedule. It's gonna cover all of these, 55,000 people. You'll reach all of them, by the end of the month, one time. Or I can hit the same people, 15,000 people, the same exact people every single day at the same exact time for 3 weeks straight with one ad per day, much less. They'll charge you more because it was a prime spot, but it was less than their package they were trying to give me. But after 3 weeks, those people felt like they knew who I was. And that is marketing. That is understanding how to become top of mind with a subset of the market that you want to know, like, and trust you. And if your message, eliminates, half or 3/4 or 90% of the people, but the 10% that hear your message that are looking for that, you're going to become that person for them. And that's that's you have to be okay with knowing that in order for you to attract anyone, you're going to have to push away people that are not for you, right?
And especially in those type of communities too, doing different types of giveaways to what that person would buy, what that person would go eat, and where they likely go. Doing different types of giveaways, $100 gift card to one person who shares a video. It's a great way to really nail that certain community, like Denny's. I wouldn't do Denny's because it's nationwide, but it's, somewhere that opens early that old people go to, that they go to eat at every single morning, that local place that everybody goes to, that your target audience goes to. Doing some type of giveaway to that individual or to that place as well is a great way to do it. Jay, do you know if KCM applies to Canada? Keeping current matters?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I'm just thinking the data is all US based. I want to say some of it would translate over. But I don't think they have a custom Canadian version of it. Yeah. But I would investigate it and see if there's anything there that's still relative, in Canada. It seems to me most of our Canadian clients use KCM. They never said they couldn't. So I would think that a lot of it would still be relevant as it relates to the lending and what's going on in the marketplace. Yep.
And as we wrap up here, we got this last question for you, Jay. I appreciate your time. This last question, I got my man Pat Nadell. Like I said, best dressed guy in real estate has to get his question in before we go.
Big Pat, what's up, baby?
Big Pat, man. He was asking, could you go over quickly? I know you're not going to go over the whole thing, the market absorption again, and how you kind of go between that. Because I'll tell you what, when you drop that CMA is dead, man, this whole room lit on fire. I saw everybody's heads go down and write that shit down.
Yeah.
So dropping the difference between CMA, market absorption, and how you kind of differentiate there.
Yeah. So essentially, and it's nothing really. It's not really that crazy of a document, right? And so it basically, I write down how many homes sold in the last 6 months, and there's a number. How many homes are active on the market, and there's a number. And then how many homes are likely to sell in the next in the time period that they said their target date, right? So it's 90 days. How many will sell? And I just do the math on, and how many new listings are coming in. So there's going to be X number of homes that sell, X number that don't sell, right? And so that's just kind of simply looking at the historical data and the projected number of new inventory that's going to come on the market. That's the hardest number to find. You have to kind of project based on historical data, but that gives you an idea, and it gives you some numbers. There'll be a certain number of homes. If you have a date, you can say, okay, these many homes are going to sell based on the absorption rate of homes selling, based on the historical data, and this many homes are not going to sell, right? So, and then that's pretty much it. And so there's not a whole lot to that. It's got 2 or 3 things on it, but it's basically high level, and then it's that data. But you'll get the document and you can play with it. It's pretty simple. And then then at the bottom of it, there's a little explanation of seasonal data. This isn't a huge deal too, by the way. I don't remember when I first kind of started paying attention to this, but we know that it's usually slower in the winter than it is in the summer. But like, if you don't know, like, we have a graph that shows 5% of all home sales for the year sell in January, 6% in February, and it gets up to like 11% in June, July, and August. And so if I'm talking to somebody who's listing their house and it's, September, the percentage of homes that sell in the next 6 months are a lot less of the overall total of homes that sell. And so this is all data points to drive trust and authority to listen to you, because when you tell them what they need to hear, they need to be willing to hear it. Otherwise, they just listen with that house with someone else for whatever price they give them that they're hopeful is going to work out. But yeah, hopefully that kind of helps. But yeah, Pat, I can get you the document. I'll go through it. We can jump on a call or something if you need to.
Hey guys. Well, Jay, I just want to say thank you so much for hopping on. I know I got a lot of value, and I'm sure a lot of other people did as well. I saw the chat just blowing up when you were dropping certain things. That CMA was definitely gold. And also, I'll tell you what, just finding that decision maker right up front, those little tips are definitely going to be a great way for people to be able to get that information. Guys, make sure you thank whoever invited you to this Zoom, because they will have the downloadables and the different links that Jay was talking about to get more information about what he does, as well as just some of those downloadables we talked about. That's the only way you'll be able to get that information. Make sure you reach out to who invited you. Also, make sure you tag me and Jay for going ahead and putting this on for you. Jay,
appreciate it.
Thank you so much, brother. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks in the next one.
You got it. See you guys
later.
Thanks, Jay.